How's it going, everyone? I am Russell Clay. We are here for the Week 10 salary exploitation. We're in double-digit weeks already, Jason. It's certainly strange. I pulled out one of my dad's retro ties from the 1980s, when he was styling and profiling with these wild, floral colors. I don't know where he got these, but somehow, 10 years after I move out, I still have some. So what's your take on my tie?
It's great. And what the great thing is that you don't even work at a job where you need to wear a tie. You just wear it. Everyone's
Shut
in
up.
T-shirts but you.
Shut up. You know what? I want to look good for the people. Week 9 went pretty well for us. I feel like we were on the right plays. I was a little light on FanDuel, so this is sad. Could have been a better week, but on to week 10. What's your basic overview? Obviously, we should talk about the Mike Evans suspension and the non-AJ Green suspension, which was blasphemous. But what's your take on the suspensions for Evans on the Buccaneers?
I mean, I think obviously the appeal is going to come. I'm debating to see if this actually goes through or not, because if it does, that's kind of outrageous. I mean, it should have been really reversed, if anything. Like, Green should have been the one suspended, and he's not even going to be suspended. So that says a lot. I mean, obviously the Mike Evans news dictates, basically week 10 and what we think of the Bucs. No Jameis Winston for a few weeks. We get some guys on buys. Obviously, the Eagles, Raiders, Chiefs, Ravens. Monday night's a Dolphins-Panthers game. It's kind of blah. But obviously we lose Seattle because that's good. I'm done. Seattle is just a team I'm struggling to figure out on a week-to-week basis.
Well, I talked to John Proctor this weekend. I asked him this morning. I had a lot of Lockett Richardson this weekend. After last week, I kind of thought, okay, they're going to be a main part of the game plan going forward. Obviously not the case, and especially on Yahoo where they were $11 and $13. I think we just ran into a matchup where had much more trouble matching up with Graham and Baldwin. And I think we're just going to have to take a little more, have a little more due diligence on the opposing defense matchup, because it kind of looks like that's how, the Seahawks are going to play this from now on, even more so, than years past. So I still think those guys are great plays week to week, but yeah, Washington has a pretty there's some good players on that Washington defense,
Yeah, fully healthy, they're decent defense. And we kind of saw that this week where, Baldwin got his out of the slot, but basically everything else was taken away.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump into quarterback. Kind of a weird week. Jameis Winston out, Ryan Fitzpatrick in. Let's not go through the rhetoric that people go through every time they talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick. Let's just go into it, because I don't even like that joke anymore. It's not funny. 61 on FD, 49 on DK, 21 on Yahoo. I'm starting to really love these min plays, like these min QB plays on Yahoo. It's so hard for the guys that are 30 to 35 to outvalue them,
When you look at quarterback scoring this year, I mean, it's down across the board, and especially at basically what's been the top guys. So, you played Jacoby Brissett last week. He was a top-end option. Tyrod Taylor, he was the highest scoring and played in that Thursday game. I mean, no one really outtook him outside of Wentz. You look at this week, I mean, Dak's expensive, Breeze is expensive, but Breeze isn't giving you the same juice that he used to. We were joking around, before, saying he doesn't care about fantasy anymore.
He really doesn't. We kind of started talking about this last week, but he really doesn't. I think he understands he's getting older, and in order to win, he has to rely on his teammates. And Alvin Kamara looks pretty special. Mark Ingram looks like that first-round pick out of Alabama, and we got Michael Thomas catching 6 for 70 every week, so that's great at $8K.
You look at this week, I mean, I don't love some of these options. Matt Ryan hasn't been great. Mariota hasn't been great. Big Ben hasn't been great. Josh McCown's expensive now. It took 10 weeks for McCown to be expensive, and now he's finally okay, I don't want to pay $6,300 for Josh McCown. But, he's been solid. I think when you look at this week, it's going to be a pay down. I think a lot of people are going to use Fitzpatrick because Fitzpatrick's been a guy that we've used in DFS before. He's been fine, a serviceable quarterback. Mike Evans thing, if he's out, that kind of, I think, downgrades Fitzpatrick a little bit. But I'm expecting Evans to appeal and just get reprocessed and have it turn into a fine. So I think at these Bearman plays, like, he's going to be popular because you look at running backs. We're going to want to load up at running backs this week. I mean, Bell against the Colts, Gurley at home against Houston, Zeke if he's not suspended again, against Atlanta. Like, we're in play for a good week.
Yeah, Rams onslaught in play again. I did think that was in play this week, and it is in play in week 10 as well. Let's talk about Eli Manning for a second, because I do think he's pretty interesting. They just have zero run game,
Yeah, like, I mean, when you look at things like Eli, both him and Dalton, like, let's talk about them real quick. Obviously, underperforming in these offenses. They've been really bad this year, like, really hard to use in DFS, but they're super cheap this week. And Eli Manning, 6,700 on FanDuel is something that's, like, crazy to me. But, I mean, he hasn't been great. I mean, I think he can hit value even on the road against San Francisco. He managed 13, 14 points against the Rams. Wasn't great. He's turned the ball over quite a bit, but that's always been his thing. Still throwing a ton. Like you said, they just don't have a run game. So I think, in terms of volume and the potential upside in these matchups, like, I'm okay with using those guys and just paying down a quarterback.
Yeah, I like Manning. Obviously, we saw Tavares King sort of overtake Roger Lewis, which I had some exposure to Roger Lewis. I thought he was a good play, but it looks like Tavares King is the guy. I think if you're looking for a cheap stack, you can definitely go with him or Ingram. Like, I definitely think that's in play, or Sterling Shepard. Like, I think all those guys are in play against San Francisco. They just lost who's their rookie linebacker? The 49ers rookie linebacker. They just lost him. The guy
I can't tell you. They've lost so many defensive guys over the last 2 weeks.
They just lost Jaquiski Tart as well for multiple weeks. So, I mean, this Niners defense is getting worse and worse and worse. So, I think Ingram, is pretty much a must play, even at expensive prices. And I think you can take shots with all those guys. So I like Manning a lot. Running back, I guess we can, start with that game. Carlos Hyde, obviously 9 receptions last week, but I want to take us back to that Indianapolis game, because I think that's the one we all have to look at and say, like, okay, what happened the last time Carlos Hyde had a smash matchup? Well, they gave him 8 carries and 1 target, and that was it. So what about that game can we look into and maybe use to predict? Like, maybe he isn't, a smash play in games that they're going to be winning potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess, like, this was the first week without Pierre Garçon. And I know he's seen decent targets, obviously, over the last couple of weeks. But, I mean, Garçon was out pretty early in that Philly game. So he's seen 20 targets over the last 2 weeks, 28 over the last 3. Hit 17 FanDuel points on FanDuel without a touchdown. Like, that's pretty hard to do for Hyde. And, I mean, he's still super cheap on both sides. Like, 6,700 on FanDuel is really reasonable. I think he's still an RB2 play. But like you said, we need to basically know his range of outcomes. And that's, like you said, the 3 FanDuel point game where we see just, a lot of randomness to what that offense is predicted. But I mean, overall, you can't knock that he's getting 6, 7, 8 targets a game and still rushing around the 12, 13. So I'm going to hope this continues. We also have to think that, he was a little bit banged up in that Arizona game. Maybe that was a potential in that Indy game where he was just kind of given more of a breather because, Hyde's obviously not the most healthy guy in the world. So I think he just might be fully healthy and he's accepted the workload. And I'm hoping that's the case.
Right. Like, if you're going to make one lineup this week, I have no problem playing Hyde. But if you're going to make 50, like, I went all in that Indy matchup. So all I'm saying is be careful. This is a really bad team. So they kind of get stuck in some weird situations. Chicago Green Bay has an interesting running back game, Howard and Aaron Jones. What's your takes there?
So you and I always kind of look and go, when a game's in Chicago, it's a lot of weirdness. It's a lot of down scoring games. This is probably the potential for both guys to just basically, more Howard, obviously, to just basically run 30 times a game this week because Green Bay's not going to be up. The game's going to be close. We know what Chicago wants to do, and that's basically only throw the ball 8, 9 times a game and then just run the rest of them. Jones on the other side, I mean, both are really reasonable mid-price backs that I think are in consideration in terms of just volume and potential. Not that, Chicago's it's not a great matchup for Jones. Howard's got the better matchup. Green Bay's rush defense has been pretty subpar this season. So I like Howard at his prices, and I like Jones. And obviously we're before the Monday night game. So, we'll see what he does against the Lions.
Absolutely. That's going to be a running back situation to follow for sure. Devontae Freeman, after 3 years, could we be seeing a little bit of regression? Kind of, we're seeing those Mohamed Sanu receiving touchdowns. Tevin Coleman with reception hasn't scored in like 5 games, kind of getting banged up. Freeman is in, a great matchup, right?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, good spot for him here. Like give me a Tevin Coleman week. That's all I'm asking. Like, give me a featured Tevin Coleman week. It's against Dallas. They have a pretty average defense. Freeman, left with the game like I don't know. I don't think he's fully healthy. He was coming into this week questionable. He had limited snaps in practice. Like, I think he's kind of on the iffy side, and we saw Tevin Coleman sneak into the game plan a little bit more. So he's super cheap. Like, I'm okay with taking a look at him in GPPs. We've been down the road where we've seen Coleman break off basically a 12 fantasy point play, before. He had the touchdown this week. So I'm kind of looking, I'm keeping an eye on Freeman moving forward this week and seeing if he's limited in any fashion or potentially out. And I'm keeping Coleman on the back burner.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think we have a big enough sample on Freeman, right? Like, as of this point to say, okay, something's definitely up. This isn't the Devontae Freeman we've known for almost 2.5 years now. So certainly worthy to think about that. Anyone else you want to mention?
Jerick McKinnon's pretty cheap over on FanDuel. He's only 6,600. Obviously, the production that he's had over the last few games has been tremendous. 20 plus FanDuel points in 3 of the last 4 games. Struggled against Baltimore, kind of as expected. I know the rush defense has been a little bit iffy this year, but I don't mind him. He's going to get work in the passing game. We saw that against Cleveland where he got 10 targets. So 6,600, even on a half PPR set, I'm cool with it. DK, he's obviously priced up. He's the same price. So, not quite the bargain, but he's a decent play.
Wide receiver, the toughest position to figure out this year. There's just not a lot going on. Honestly, I think Antonio Brown pretty much needs to be in your lineup with how volatile the rest of the position has been this year. So do you have any values for us? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Who's going to give us points?
Yeah, I mean, early thought process, like at this week, wide receiver is not a fun one. Yeah, like you mentioned, I think AB, because we have the Fitzpatrick value play at quarterback, you can jam AB in and like jam a Todd Gurley Bell type and then like pay down for one of these mid-range guys. Like, it's certainly viable this week. We have like AJ Green. He's not in the bad spot against Tennessee. They struggle against wideouts. Julio Jones is just, how many times can you play this guy, until he actually keeps going? Like, you're losing money playing him.
He did well last week, but he certainly didn't win you anything either. He should have had 160 yards and a touchdown.
He dropped that ball for us.
That was year 2 Devontae Adams-esque, if you ask me. If all these people get on Amari Cooper, that was about as bad as anything Amari Cooper did this year. So, something's up. He's hurt. A healthy Julio Jones doesn't drop that. You saw him on the sideline 3 times yesterday, like complaining, not complaining, but like he's hurt, like clearly. So this isn't great. I'm in fade Julio mode until further notice.
until week 17.
Yes, until week 17.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're looking at top options, like I think the Lions guys come in play, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate against Cleveland. But I mean, values, like I mentioned Josh McCown being expensive. I just think now you get your exposure to like Robbie Anderson, Jermaine Kearse. Jeremy Curley's just suspended for 4 games for PED use. Seferian Jenkins is a guy they can continue to use. So there's some decent values. I don't like the situation in Green Bay, but Green Bay's wide receivers are really cheap. They're basically no one's above 7K, no one's above 6K over on DraftKings. So you have some options. Corey Davis, GPP dart throw, I am in on this week. He's super cheap across all 3 sites. We know how he's going to be used. There's that potential for a 70-yard touchdown in GPPs, and he's basically priced as a wide receiver 3.
My only reservation is I don't know what opposing defenses are going to do, whether they're going to cover Rashard Matthews as the number 1 or Corey Davis. Usually we see young wide receivers get easy matchups early on, but he was like a top 5 pick. I'm not sure how the Bengals are going to play him. But yeah, I mean, he's cheap enough. Got a few opportunities this week. Didn't get what we wanted. Rashard Matthews got it, but certainly worthy of a dart throw for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned Sterling Shepard too, who's still really cheap. Like he's 57 on FanDuel. So I think, like you said, those are viable value options. They're not fun passing games to attack, but they're cheap.
Absolutely. Amendola, kind of been a weird sort of fantasy player all year, but with Chris Hogan out, you think he's a good play?
No, but like he's cheap enough to consider. Like if you need, if you're really loading up, like he's a fine wide receiver 3 play on FanDuel for $5,300, $13 on Yahoo. We were talking about the Denver defense. It's just they've lost their ability to just really fly around the field. Like they're not that turnover generating defense anymore, and they're being put in bad spots. And if you don't think they're going to be put in bad spots in New England, they're in Denver this week, but against New England, like I'm still just not buying it. This team's in trouble. They're done.
Okay. So tight end. This is the ugliest. This is something else this week. No Kelsey, no Ertz. You either go Gronk or you don't. So what's your plan?
Well, you talked Ingram. I mean, Ingram's a good, but you basically go those 2 guys or you don't.
Yeah, okay. That's fair. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's ugly out there. So what do you got for us?
I'm going to go back to the well on Hunter Henry. I people didn't, but you look at this Jacksonville team, a lot of targets are getting funneled down to their tight ends because those cornerbacks are so good. So I'm okay with using Henry this week. His price is back down. He's 3,900 on DK. Obviously, he was, chalk. The last time he played against New England, only saw 2 targets, didn't run a ton of routes. I'm okay with going back to the well there. Kyle Rudolph is still the guy that's too cheap for me. Who you can kind of bank on giving, 7 targets a game. He's seen, 7 or more in each of the last 4. He's going to hover right around 7 or 8 FanDuel points for a floor. So I'm okay with him at 5,400. Once again, he's kind of relied on. Washington, not good against tight ends. So he's the guy that kind of stands out if you're not really paying up in that mid-range, because outside of that, I mean, the Washington situation, we need to keep an eye on Vernon Davis. I don't mind him, but very little is below that.
Yeah, going to be a tough week to figure out there. Obviously, last second we got Trey Burton as he flew down from the heavens for us, but
Ed Dixon too, man. He had an overthrown touchdown pass from Newton.
So, all right, defense. Chicago, again, we talked about it, or you talked about it, but they just have this weird team where at home it's like there's this force field that like sucks energy out of the opposing team or something. I don't know. Like they should lose these games, but like they're a good play and they're cheap.
Yeah, I mean, their home games this year. They allowed 3 points to Carolina. They scored, 7 against Minnesota. Scored 10 against Pittsburgh at home. Obviously, home against Atlanta, they didn't do much, but 4,300. I mean, they're averaging 9.6 fantasy points per game. Obviously, a lot of that was due to the Carolina game. For 4,300, like 3K on DK, like I'm willing to punt that and go a little Jordan Howard Chicago Bears stack.
Absolutely. I think that's a fun way to go. And we're at the point in the season where we can start to target bad offenses with even mediocre defenses. That's kind of where we're at. The 49ers, even with the Giants, who's not looking too hot either, but they could, make a run at it this week. The Jets D is actually not looking too terrible. So I think we can do like weird stuff like that. Could always be a Phillip Rivers 3-pick game. But Pittsburgh is the other one you put down here. Take it away.
I mean, still too cheap for me. Like they were let down a little bit against Detroit, that Monday night game. But when you look at it, I mean, Pittsburgh 4,600 on FanDuel, they're pricey on DraftKings and Yahoo. They're still top 3 in terms of where the defense is ranked. So you do get the bargain on FanDuel a little bit. Once again, they come in with a stack that you can pair with Bell. They doctor up a lot of pressure. They got really good corners. That's how you beat the Colts. We've seen it this year that good defenses, they rack up points against the Colts. Houston's just, they're not a good defense. We knew that coming in. We weren't really looking at them as a defense to use in week 9. So I think here you can look at it even on the road. Pittsburgh at 49 or 4,600 is reasonable. And I'm even okay with it on DraftKings or Yahoo.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to throw in there before we head out?
No, just free Mike Evans.
No, don't free him. I don't have any shares in any formats this year, so he can sit out as many games as he wants. If you like what we're doing here, certainly check out dailyfantasycafe.com. If you want to read this article, certainly check it out there. It's good stuff, and it gives you a little more in-depth than even what we ran through here. We do a slate breakdown later in the week, so definitely check that out, where we break down, all of our favorite plays. So certainly check that out, and we'll see you guys in week 11.